Hi, my name's Demi. My sister once poured soda into the gas tank of my SUV and smiled while saying, "Oops, just an accident." But that wasn't the beginning. That was just the moment I realized they'd been rewriting my life for years, silently, systematically. They used my name to get loans, erased me from family speeches, forged my signature on legal documents, all while calling it love. Have you ever felt like you were being erased from your own family one tiny decision at a time, until you no longer existed? I used to think I was overreacting. Now I wonder, how many times did I excuse betrayal because it came dressed as family? Saturday mornings were usually my calmest hours, the silence before life remembered to roar. I'd brewed my coffee just the way I liked it, black, no sugar, no pretense, and I was halfway through adjusting the last few lines on a work proposal when I realized I hadn't moved my SUV into the shade like I usually did on weekends. I grabbed my mug, slid into my house slippers, and stepped out into the driveway of my Denver home. The sun was already casting long shadows, but the air still had that early morning chill. That's when I noticed it. The gas cap. It was open, hanging there like a forgotten secret. Next to it stood Isolde, my older sister, holding a half-empty bottle of soda like she'd just finished watering a dying plant. She looked at me with that face I'd grown to loathe. Not angry, not guilty, not even embarrassed. Just that smug, bored smirk of someone who's gotten away with things her entire life. "Oh," she said, tilting her head. "Oops, just an accident." I didn't speak. Not immediately. There was a pause, less than 2 seconds, but it felt like I'd stood there for a whole season, watching that syrupy liquid slide down the side of my black SUV. My breath caught, not from surprise, but from the confirmation of something I'd buried for years. I walked over, crouched beside the rear of the car, and sniffed. Soda, sweet, carbonated, completely incompatible with a fuel system. My hand trembled, but not because I was scared. My body simply hadn't caught up with the realization that something deliberate had just been wrapped in laughter. Isolde had always been reckless, but this was different. I straightened, looking at her without a word. She offered a shrug, like she'd forgotten whether she meant to kill the car or refill the washer fluid. "Is this like the time you accidentally sent my college application to the wrong address?" I asked calmly, no hint of emotion in my voice. She blinked, one beat too long. "That was ages ago. Let it go already. Let it go." Again. This was the same woman who'd once mistakenly taken my prescription anti-anxiety meds and then made a joke about how I was always too tightly wound anyway. The same woman who broke the necklace Grandma left me, then swore it must have been cheap if it broke so easily. And now, soda in a gas tank. "Cars can be cleaned," said a voice behind us. I turned to see Marlene, our mother, watching us from the porch, holding her phone like she was about to post a gardening tip instead of witnessing an act of sabotage. "Don't be dramatic, Demi," she added, stepping down toward us. "Isolde probably thought it was the windshield washer." "Did you?" I asked, looking directly at my sister. Isolde's eyes narrowed, then widened, then shrugged again. "Maybe, it was early. Who knows?" I did. I knew. But I didn't scream. I didn't lash out. I didn't do anything the old me might have done when I still believed pointing out truth made people listen. I stood there, nodding slightly as if I'd been given a weather report I didn't ask for. I turned and walked back into the house. By the time I'd rinsed out my mug and sat back down in front of my laptop, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, unwilling to move. The document I'd been editing, fiscal projections for the next quarter, blurred in my vision. It wasn't about the SUV. It never had been. It was about the pattern, the quiet, intentional erasure of me that had started long before gas tanks or birthday parties or graduation speeches. The way Marlene always had two versions of everything, one that involved praising Isolde, and one that explained why I should be proud just to be there. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who balanced checkbooks at 16, the one who never borrowed money, the one who took care of Grandma until the end, even when it meant missing 3 weeks of work. Isolde was the glitter, the sparkle, the she means well wildcard that everyone forgave. And me? I was the too serious one, the hard-to-love one, the one who always needed to lighten up. That night, I couldn't sleep. The scent of soda, stale and artificial, still clung to my nostrils, even though I hadn't stepped outside in hours. I sat in my office, lights dimmed, screen dark, and opened my leather-bound journal. It was a gift from myself to myself 2 birthdays ago. The first year I didn't wait for someone else to acknowledge my existence. I turned to a fresh page and wrote just 1 sentence. Next time, I won't say anything either, but I will be ready. And this time, I meant it. It took just 1 bank notification to confirm what I already knew. I was being erased financially too. But before that message lit up my phone, I had already made the choice to stop pretending things were okay. And that shift started the moment I stepped onto my mother's back patio, 2 days after the soda incident, holding a birthday cake I had custom ordered with her favorite buttercream and paid for in full, along with the caterers and the rented outdoor tent. It was a Sunday afternoon, just past 2. The Colorado sun was bold that day, beating down on the manicured backyard Marlene had insisted be perfect for photos. Round tables were draped in white linens, silver balloons fluttered on each chair, and a jazz playlist hummed through portable speakers. People I barely recognized mingled near the bar, cousins, neighbors, old church ladies whose names escaped me. I slipped through the crowd unnoticed, which didn't surprise me anymore. My family had mastered the art of seeing only what, or who, they wanted to. Isolde was already there, of course. Wearing a pale pink wrap dress that matched the decorations, she was surrounded by a small orbit of admiration, guests laughing too hard at her jokes, touching her elbow like she was royalty. I watched her toss her hair back and say, "Well, you know how hard it was to pull this all together," as if she'd been planning this party instead of just showing up 30 minutes ago. I set the cake down on the buffet table and quietly made my way into the kitchen, checking on the platters of deviled eggs and shrimp cocktail. The caterers gave me a polite nod, one recognizing me from the payment app I'd used. I returned to the backyard just in time to hear the clinking of a fork against a glass. Marlene stood at the head of the patio, arms lifted slightly, smile fixed and polished. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "It means so much to be surrounded by family and friends, especially in times like these when people are so busy and disconnected. It's just special to have this moment together." She looked around, paused for effect, then placed her hand on Isolde's shoulder. And none of this would have been possible without my beautiful daughter Isolde, who organized everything so perfectly. Applause. Isolde feigned modesty, touching her chest as if humbled. I stood there, invisible. No mention of me. No nod. No, and Demi helped too. Not even a glance in my direction. Just like that, I was erased. A few guests turned toward me, those who knew better, but no one said anything. The music resumed. People returned to their wine glasses and gossip. I stepped back, my heart pounding not from anger, but a kind of slow-burning disbelief. It wasn't just that they ignored me, it was that they expected me to swallow it like I always did. I stayed for another 20 minutes, long enough to cut and serve slices of cake like I was part of the catering staff. Then I slipped into the house to grab my purse. As I passed through the living room, my eyes landed on the family photo wall. There were 12 frames, all positioned perfectly along a beige-painted wall in 2 straight rows. Dad's Navy portrait, Isolde's graduation photo, Uncle Mitch with his ridiculous fishing hat, even photos of my cousins and their dogs. And then there was mine, 5th from the left, in the 2nd row. No nameplate. Every other frame had one, gold-etched plates reading things like Isolde, the firstborn, Grandpa Thomas, Dad, retired Navy. Mine was blank. I stepped closer, as if the light might reveal some engraving I had missed. Nope. Just a frame, just a face. It was a photo from my first promotion ceremony. Me in a gray suit, holding a plaque, smiling at the camera. I had emailed that picture to Marlene years ago when she asked for an update for the wall. She hadn't even bothered to label it. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. Then I opened my email app, sent it to myself, and typed just 1 sentence in the subject line. This is the moment I stopped trying to belong. Walking out of that house felt different this time. Not because I was hurt, though I was, but because I had finally stopped hoping for them to act differently. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you let go of wishing people will change. Driving home, I turned off the music. Let the silence settle. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Work was waiting. Numbers to run. Reports to file. The usual spreadsheet calm, until the bank alert popped up on my screen. A new authorized user had been added to one of my older joint credit accounts. I froze. That account had been dormant for years. A backup. A just in case. It wasn't linked to anything current, but I'd kept it open because closing credit lines can mess with your score. I clicked to view details. Isolde. She'd added herself as a user. Without telling me. Without asking. And somehow, she'd already made 2 charges. One at a luxury spa, another at a boutique in Cherry Creek that sold handbags I couldn't pronounce. My fingers hovered over the keyboard again, but this time, I didn't feel frozen. I felt ready. But before I lawyered up, I needed to see just how deep the damage ran. And to do that, I had to go quiet for a while. Not disappear, just observe. That same evening, after I'd closed out my laptop, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, just staring out the window above the sink. The light outside had softened to that dusty gold hue Colorado evenings tend to wear in early spring. Cars passed along the street. A dog barked somewhere nearby. Life, as always, carried on. I poured myself another half glass of wine, then sat back at my computer and logged into the credit account that had triggered the alert. The purchases were right there in bold, like a neon billboard on a back road I never meant to drive down. A full-day package at a wellness retreat in Boulder. A $1,200 charge at a boutique specializing in image consulting. Another for a 2-night stay at an Aspen resort, under my name, Isolde. Always aiming to upgrade herself on someone else's dime. I reached for my phone and fired off a single text. "Did you open a card under my name?" Her reply came back in less than a minute. "Wow, I thought we shared everything. Don't be petty." I stared at the screen for a while. Then the family group chat lit up. Marlene chimed in. "Let's not turn this into drama. We're family." There it was again. Family as a shield, as a weapon, a place where wrongdoing could live as long as it wore a familiar face. I didn't respond. Instead, the next morning, I called Noah. We hadn't talked in over a year, but he picked up on the 3rd ring with a warm, surprised, "Demi, you okay?" "Not really," I said. "I need help." Noah had gone to law school after working in admin for a mid-size firm. He now worked as a legal assistant for a title and probate office downtown, and he still owed me for helping him pay rent 3 months straight after a breakup he never fully got over. I explained the situation, light on emotion, heavy on facts. "I can pull recent property filings under your name," he offered, "just to see what's out there." By lunch, he'd emailed me a PDF. It was worse than I thought. The family condo, our parents' old place on West Alameda, had been quietly transferred from joint ownership to sole ownership. Isolde's name sat at the top. Mine was nowhere in sight. Well, almost nowhere. My signature was on the final page. Big, swooping, and wrong. There was something off about it. The curve of the letters was too playful, the spacing not like mine, but it was the G that sealed it. My last name, Riker, had never looked like that under my hand. That looped backward curl, it was unmistakable. Isolde used to practice my handwriting when we were kids. She'd write fake notes to teachers, pretending to be me. She once forged a sick note to get out of gym, using my name. We laughed about it back then. Now, not so funny. I needed to see the original. So I left work an hour early, told my boss I wasn't feeling well, technically true, and drove down to the city clerk's office. Traffic was light. The drive took 17 minutes, but it felt like hours. The woman behind the counter had a kind face and wore red-framed glasses that matched her lipstick. She pulled the deed file for me without asking too many questions. I took it to one of the side tables, sat down, and opened it slowly. There it was. A full-color copy of the transfer document. The signatures looked official, until you examined the pressure of the ink, the inconsistent slant, the schoolgirl loop on the G. I traced the letters with my eyes, Not touching the page, but memorizing every flaw. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't oversight. This was fraud. It was hard to say how long I sat there. I must have looked strange, just staring at a piece of paper like it was a ghost only I could see. But I didn't care. Eventually, I stood, closed the file, and thanked the clerk on my way out. I didn't drive home immediately. I parked 2 blocks away and just sat in the car with the engine off. The air was still, warm inside the cabin. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. That moment, that quiet, suspended breath, I felt it settle somewhere between my ribs. Not fear, not even anger. Just a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. I took the file out of my bag and opened it on the passenger seat. I pulled a sticky note from the dashboard cubby, one of those left over from my budgeting system. Wrote a single sentence. "You want ownership? Let's talk legally." I slapped it on top of the page, covering her forgery with my truth. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. My phone buzzed a few times, texts, emails, probably Marlene trying to smooth it over before I made a scene. I ignored them all. When I got home, I slid the folder into a locked drawer in my office and sat down at my desk. I stared at the blinking cursor on my monitor and whispered to myself, let's see how far she went. Because if she'd gone this far, there was no telling what else she'd signed, spent, or stolen in my name. Once I saw how easily my name had been twisted on paper, I started wondering how many other corners of my life had been quietly rewritten without my consent. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, coffee long gone cold, and began scrolling through every digital thread I'd taken for granted. It started with email. I searched my inbox for a message from a client I remembered replying to weeks earlier. Nothing. I tried another one. Same result. The messages were gone. Not in spam, not archived, not even in trash. Just missing. A quick check of my security settings turned everything sideways. My email forwarding was active, set to a secondary address I didn't recognize. A long string of numbers, followed by a generic domain. When I clicked deeper, the account recovery phone number ended in digits I did recognize. My mother's. I froze. Not from confusion, from realization. There was no way this was accidental. No scenario where she could have helped me into this. This wasn't oversight. This was surveillance wrapped in care. She had been reading my mail. For how long? I couldn't say for sure. But judging by the forwarding date in the logs, almost a year. That meant every notification, every lawyer correspondence, even updates from my tax advisor. She'd seen them all. My hands shook, not out of panic, but from a slow, dawning anger. One that settled in the pit of my stomach and began to burn steady. I stepped out onto my back patio for air, phone still in hand. The night was cool, quiet. I hit dial. She picked up almost instantly. Demi? Marlene's voice was too bright, too rehearsed. Everything all right? Have you been reading my emails? There was a pause, just enough to confirm guilt. I was just trying to help, she said. You always say how overwhelmed you are. I thought I could manage some of the clutter. You set up auto-forwarding, accessed my legal communications, and never told me. That's not help. That's intrusion. Oh, come on now, she sighed, tone turning sharp. I did what any mother would do. You're always so busy. You miss things. I didn't miss anything, I said, voice calm but sharp. You stole access and justified it to yourself. Another pause. You're being dramatic. There it was again, my entire life in 2 words. I hung up. No yelling, no begging, just silence. The next morning, I checked my email forwarding settings again. Disabled everything. Changed passwords, set up 2-factor authentication, created a new backup account. Then I checked every financial service, insurance portal, and legal account I could think of. By the end of the day, my digital footprint was scrubbed. Not perfect, but protected. A week passed. Things quieted. On the surface. Then came the graduation party. My cousin Ellie had invited me herself. I'd contributed to her final semester tuition, quietly. No one in the family knew. Ellie was the one person left who didn't treat my silence as weakness. The event was held at a community center near Cherry Creek. Tables draped in school colors, paper banners strung across the walls, buffet trays lined up along the back wall. I arrived early, offered to help with setup, then took a seat near the side so I wouldn't be in the way. I flipped through the printed program someone handed me. Under Special Thanks and Speakers, my name was there, third on the list, right after Ellie's aunt and one of her old high school teachers. But when the speeches started, my name vanished from the air. The MC skipped right over me. Then Isolde stood up, wearing a bright red wrap dress that drew every camera lens. She launched into a tearful monologue about family, sacrifice, and showing up when it counts. She talked about how proud she was of Ellie, how she'd always been behind the scenes, helping however she could. She never used my name, but her final line hit like a slap across the room. Some of us give from the heart, not for recognition. The crowd clapped. I sat there motionless. I didn't leave right away. I waited, watched as people congratulated her like she'd just funded the college herself. One person even said, "You've always been the strong one, Isolde. Some folks need credit, others just do the work." On the drive home, I didn't even turn on the radio, just silence, that kind that wraps around you like a wet sheet, uncomfortable, heavy, impossible to ignore. When I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed, family group chat. Marlene. Isolde's speech was beautiful, really showed what giving without ego looks like. Then someone sent a photo from the event. A wide shot of the family row, all seated neatly, except my seat had been cut from the frame, cropped out, erased. It was deliberate. There was no mistaking it. I sat there for a moment longer. No tears. Just that same feeling I'd had outside the clerk's office when I saw my forged signature. Clarity. I walked inside, slipped off my shoes, grabbed a bottle of water, and texted one word to Noah. Now. The morning after I texted Noah, I woke up before my alarm, something that hadn't happened in years without a flight or an emergency. The light hadn't even broken through the curtains yet, but my mind was already cataloging the steps. No coffee, no phone scroll, just resolve. By 8, I had already submitted my PTO request for the week. A vague note about personal administrative matters to avoid raising questions. My boss replied within the hour. Take the time you need. I appreciated that she didn't ask for details. Boundaries were easier when they were respected without resistance. At 10:30, I met Noah at a coffee shop just far enough from downtown to avoid familiar faces, but close enough to avoid suspicion. We chose a corner booth by the window. He had a legal pad already open, notes scribbled, clips attached. The man came prepared. "You weren't kidding," he said after I handed him the folder. "They really went all in." "That's just the surface," I replied. "I want it all undone. Every access point, every account. I want them locked out of my finances, my medical files, my insurance, subscriptions, everything." Noah nodded. "We'll start with joint accounts. Then I'll draft revocation letters for property co-ownership. We'll file them by end of week." He paused before adding, "You sure you want to do this quietly?" I looked at him and didn't blink. "This is quiet. You haven't seen me loud yet." The rest of the day was a blur of signatures, account closures, and password resets. I visited 2 different banks, a notary office, and logged more time in online portals than I had in the past 6 months combined. By the time I got home, I had revoked everything. My mother's name was no longer listed as my emergency contact. Isolde was removed as co-owner on the property deed. They could no longer trace me through my digital fingerprints, and that's when the dinner invitation came in. A cheerful message in the family group chat. "Let's heal. Sunday dinner, all of us, just us. No tension, no stress. Home-cooked meal like old times." Marlene. No mention of what had happened, no apology, just this sugary, selective amnesia they all relied on to reset the world on their terms. I stared at the message for a full minute before I typed, "I'll be there." Not because I believed anything had changed, but because it was time they saw who they were dealing with now. Sunday arrived with the crisp kind of breeze that hints at summer but doesn't fully commit. I chose my outfit carefully. Nothing flashy, nothing dull, just a solid navy dress with clean lines and no room for interpretations. I pulled my hair back tight, wore minimal jewelry, and kept my expression neutral. As I stepped into Marlene's house, the scent of garlic and butter hit me first. She was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. Her smile stretched too wide when she saw me. "Demi, you made it!" "Of course," I said, placing a small bottle of wine on the counter. "Wouldn't miss it." Isolde appeared in the dining room, rearranging silverware like it mattered. She offered a nod, but not a word. Her posture screamed entitlement. She acted like the host, not the guest. Like she hadn't siphoned money from me for months. Like she hadn't erased my presence from every family occasion with the skill of a PR firm. Dinner began with awkward pleasantries, surface-level chatter, and forced laughs. No one mentioned what had happened, just the way they liked it. I let them have their show. I sipped wine, complimented the roast, even chuckled at one of Uncle Mitch's tired fishing stories. Then dessert was served, chocolate mousse, Marlene's favorite. As the plates were passed around, I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim white envelope. I placed it in the center of the table. Marlene looked at it like it might explode. Isolde froze mid-spoonful. "What's this?" Marlene asked. "Just a few updates," I replied. Figured now was as good a time as any. Inside the envelope were 3 things: official documents confirming closure of all jointly held accounts, a notarized revocation of co-ownership for the condo, a screenshot of the email logs showing months of forwarding to Marlene's private account. Marlene unfolded the papers with trembling fingers. Her mouth opened once, closed, then opened again. I didn't mean to. It was only because you're always so overwhelmed." "You mean I have boundaries?" I said. "You just didn't like them." Isolde scoffed, leaned back in her chair. "This is pathetic. You're treating your own family like criminals." I turned to her. "No, I'm treating you like people who crossed lines and didn't expect consequences." Silence. Marlene tried to regroup. "We're family. We don't need to involve the law." "That's funny," I said, standing. "Because apparently we didn't need to involve me either. You all handled that part on your own." I picked up my purse, smoothed my dress, and looked at both of them. Really looked. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "Just making sure you both understand. That season of my life is over." Marlene's hand trembled as she tried to refold the papers. Isolde rolled her eyes, but her jaw was tight. As I pushed my chair back, I paused. Let the moment stretch. "If either of you crosses a line again," I said, my voice calm and clear, "the next envelope comes with a judge." Then I walked out. No one followed. It didn't take long for the aftershocks to start. 3 days after that dinner, the one where everything finally, irrevocably broke, the first ripple arrived. Not from Isolde directly, of course. She never worked in straight lines. But from the orbit she'd always controlled with ease, the enablers, the sideline sympathizers, the ones who claimed to hate drama but always had a front-row seat. The family group chat, which had been eerily silent since I'd walked away, lit up again. This time, it was veiled concern masquerading as diplomacy, the kind of messages written with sugar on the tongue but knives under the fingernails. "Your sister's just been under so much stress lately, Demi. Maybe you could ease up a bit? I know money gets tricky, but did it really have to come to this? She's your sister. Come on, Dem. She didn't mean to hurt you. Don't punish her for being overwhelmed." Not a single person asked how I was doing. Not one message wondered aloud what it must have felt like to realize that my name, my credit, my history, my trust, had been treated like a shared family resource, like a debit card passed around behind my back. They painted it as punishment, as bitterness, as cold-heartedness, as though I'd simply woken up one morning and decided to ruin Isolde's life out of spite. I didn't reply. Instead, I muted the chat, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and dove into my work emails with the calm of someone who had already made peace with their decision. That afternoon, Noah called. "Hey, you sitting down?" "Give me a second." I lowered myself into the chair by my window, notebook still open beside me. "I ran the monitoring like you asked. Isolde's credit took a major dive. There's a repossession order pending." I didn't say anything at first, just stared blankly at the spreadsheet on my screen, its columns and numbers blurring into abstraction. "It's for the Range Rover," he added. "She missed 4 payments. It was originally under your name, remember? Even though you pulled off the lease last year, the restructure was never finalized." A pause. She assumed you'd keep covering it, because why wouldn't you? The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was familiar. This was the pattern, Isolde leaping with the confidence that someone would catch her. Usually me. Later that evening, I was wrapping up a client report when I caught a glimpse of movement outside my window. At first, I wasn't sure why I turned to look. Maybe it was the low hiss of hydraulics. Maybe some part of me just knew. There she was, Isolde, standing at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, mouth moving at warp speed. But the tow truck operator didn't blink. He'd seen this 100 times before. Another designer handbag, another angry protest, another, "This is a mistake." He finished the paperwork, hooked up the car, and drove off. Just like that, I didn't gloat. There was no twisted joy in watching it happen, just a quiet, steady reminder that eventually, gravity applies to everyone. 2 days later, the second fracture appeared. It was a text from Eileen, an old colleague of mine who now worked in compliance at a major marketing firm that handled influencer partnerships. "Hey, just so you know, your sister's name came up in a vendor audit. Her paperwork listed your credentials as a reference. It flagged as a fraud risk." I stared at the message for a beat, exhaling slowly before I typed back. "Thanks for the heads up." "She's being dropped from the contract," Eileen added. "Didn't want it to catch you off guard. Sorry." I didn't tell her not to apologize. Some things don't need forgiveness, they just need distance. Apparently, Isolde had used my professional license numbers, my resume highlights, even a quote pulled from an old LinkedIn article I'd written, as part of her own brand credibility. She wove it into her pitches, her sponsorship decks, her influencer identity. For a while, it worked, but lies have a shelf life, and this one expired in the middle of a quarterly audit. There wasn't a public fallout, no dramatic cancellation, just digital silence. Her Instagram went from daily boss babe content to radio silence. No new skincare collabs, no luxury gift hauls, no polished captions about resilience and hustle. The comments trickled in. "Weren't you partnering with GLO? No update on the retreat launch? Is everything okay?" No answers. And then came the last act of this quiet unraveling, a voice message from Marlene. It arrived in the family chat late, just before 11 p.m., while I was reading in bed. I didn't open it immediately. I stared at the notification, thumb hovering over it like it held the weight of everything I'd already chosen to walk away from. Eventually, curiosity won. I tapped play. Her voice was already brittle with emotion, that familiar quiver that always danced on the edge of guilt and manipulation. "Demi, I just don't understand what's happening to you. You're tearing your sister apart. Over what? A misunderstanding? You used to be the one who held this family together. The kind one, the mature one. This isn't you." I paused it there. That was all I needed to hear. It was the clarity I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. They didn't hate what I'd done. They hated that I finally stopped asking for permission. I scrolled back through the group chat, hovered for a breath, then tapped leave group. No fanfare, no message, no closing argument, just gone. The next morning, the universe chimed in with its own escalation. I was sitting at the table, finishing breakfast, scrambled eggs, grapefruit, coffee cooling beside me, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Subject, subpoena, request filed, property dispute. Plaintiff, Isolde Vance. I stared at the screen, my expression unchanged. Then I set the phone down calmly, wiped my mouth, and folded my napkin over the empty plate. No panic, just resolve. I walked to my office, opened my laptop, and began drafting the legal response. Counterclaim, fraud, identity misuse, attached, documentation, timeline, witnesses. If she wanted a courtroom, she'd get one, and this time, she wouldn't be able to crop the truth out of the frame. The message came just as I stepped out of the courthouse lobby, my heels clacking quietly on the concrete walkway, echoing against glass walls that had seen decades of other people's betrayals. Let's talk settlement before this hits the media. No name, just a number I didn't recognize, and no courage behind it. I didn't bother replying, because I hadn't come to negotiate. I hadn't walked into that courtroom, alone, carrying every document and every silence they'd ever handed me, just to be bartered with after the gavel dropped. The hearing had lasted less than an hour. Noah had been brilliant, calm, concise, not a single word wasted. He presented the packet we'd titled Timeline of Erasure, and that's exactly what it was. A brutal, factual documentation of everything they'd rewritten, my accounts, my property, my signature, my reputation. One by one, he laid it out for the judge. Exhibits A through F, forged deeds, doctored email forwarding rules, unauthorized credit authorizations, screenshots of Isolda's influencer profiles referencing my credentials. The judge, a man in his early 60s with sharp eyes and a tone that didn't rise above conversational, flipped through the files slowly. His silence didn't mean indifference, it meant understanding. He didn't need to ask questions. The paper did the talking. "There's enough here," he said finally, "to warrant full revocation of shared assets. This is not a minor miscommunication. It's a pattern." When Isolda tried to speak, the judge raised one hand slightly, not even looking at her. "You will speak only when you are no longer in contempt." Her mouth snapped shut. Marlene, seated beside her, looked pale. Paler than I'd ever seen her. She didn't argue. She didn't even look at me. She stared straight ahead, like the ceiling might save her. When the judge finalized the ruling, it was as if the last puzzle piece had clicked into place. I was awarded sole ownership of the condo. Marlene's name was removed from all financial affiliations and family accounts where she'd quietly lingered as an administrator. Isolda was ordered to cease any use of my name, credentials, likeness, or affiliation, professionally or personally. The judge added one more line before adjourning. Any future attempt to reinstate shared claims will require direct court approval. It was done. I walked out ahead of them, didn't wait to gloat, didn't turn to see if they followed. The corridor smelled like disinfectant and something vaguely metallic, probably the memory of too many verdicts gone cold. Outside, the air was dry. The sky, for once, didn't feel heavy. As I neared the parking garage, I saw them, Marlene and Isolda, huddled near the stairwell, whispering. Marlene was holding Isolda's hand, gently rubbing her shoulder like she used to when we were kids, and Isolda would throw tantrums in public. Her face was drawn, her mouth tight. Isolda's eyes were red, but her sobs were silent. She wasn't sorry. She was embarrassed. There's a difference. I didn't stop walking. Later that evening, I made myself a bowl of pasta, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop to check the final copies of the court documents Noah had sent over. Everything looked in order. Before shutting it down, I glanced at the phone again. Another text had come in, same unknown number. "This can still be private. Let's avoid escalation." I deleted it. The next morning, the Denver Post ran a story on digital fraud involving influencer marketing. It didn't name names, but it referenced a local civil case where credentials had been misused to land corporate sponsorships. I didn't send it to anyone. I didn't need to. An hour later, my old high school friend Kelly texted me a screenshot. "Is this about your sister?" I typed back, "Not my story to tell." She replied, "Well, whoever it is, I hope the real victim gets peace." I didn't correct her. That was enough. By afternoon, the family group chat, which I had long since left, exploded. My cousin forwarded me screenshots without asking. "You humiliated her. You've always been jealous. I hope you're happy." And finally, from Marlene herself. "You burned everything down over a piece of paper." That one stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because it was so wrong. They had burned it. I had just stopped pretending the ashes were confetti. That evening, I sat by the window in my living room. The light outside had softened into a dusky orange, the kind that made the tops of trees glow. A soft breeze nudged the curtain. I hadn't spoken to anyone all day, and I didn't mind. My phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't from a blocked number. It was a new message, from a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line: Request to discuss mediation, Vance versus Riker. I closed the notification because I didn't need discussion. I didn't need settlement. I needed closure, and it was already mine. I didn't answer because I wasn't interested in going back. The message had been clear, desperate even, but it came too late and from the wrong place. Fear, not remorse. I set the phone face down on the windowsill beside the cabin's coffee pot. Steam was already rising from my mug. The air that morning was crisp, clean, sharp with pine. I could see the edge of the lake from here, still as glass, the trees mirrored in its surface like it couldn't be bothered to move anymore. I understood that. After the hearing, I'd driven up here alone. No calls, no company, no second guessing, just quiet. Noah handled everything that came after. The letters, the notices, the questions from attorneys who were suddenly full of options. I told him exactly what to say. She's not interested in negotiation. The ruling stands. I guess that's what happens when you spend a lifetime being overlooked. People don't know what to do when you finally step outside the frame they built for you. 3 days after the ruling, Marlene messaged me directly. No voice notes, no drama, just a single line of text. You've made your point. Now fix it. You've humiliated the family. I sat with that sentence for almost an hour. Then I typed my response and hit send. I didn't humiliate anyone. I just stopped participating in the humiliation of myself. That was the last I heard from her. But the family wasn't done with me. I found out through a forwarded email, because of course someone thought I should still be included, that a family meeting had been scheduled. To discuss distribution of the remaining estate from Grandma Quinn, it read. Location, the same lakeside cabin where I was currently sipping my coffee. Date, Saturday, 2 p.m. They didn't know I was already here, and I didn't plan to be present. Instead, I called Noah and asked him to represent me. They need a witness, not a target, I said. He didn't argue. Saturday arrived with a cloudless sky and a breeze light enough to rustle the birch leaves. Around noon, I walked down to the dock, set out a folding stool, and began painting with 2 of the neighborhood kids, Sophie and Caleb, both under 10, both more honest than most adults I'd met in the last decade. They asked about the birds. I showed them how to mix watercolors to get that dusty blue shade chickadees carry. We talked about clouds, shadows, where the light came from, and why it changed so fast. At 2:05, Noah called. It's done. I didn't stop brushing the color across the paper. Go on. They held the meeting at the county courthouse. Your nameplate wasn't set out, just a chair. Empty, center of the table. I smiled. Figures. He continued. The new will was read. The room was mostly quiet until the part that said, to the granddaughter who had the courage to walk away, I leave not just the property, but the freedom to finally be who she is without being rewritten. I let the brush fall to the water. Then it got interesting, Noah added. He told me the full inheritance, this cabin, what was left in the family trust, even the small antique collection Grandma kept in storage, had been left to me, uncontested, solid, legally tight. Isolde's share, reduced to $1. Marlene. Stripped from any future role as trustee or decision-maker. Apparently, Isolde stormed out of the room, knocking over a glass pitcher on her way. Marlene tried to argue with the attorney present, but he didn't entertain it. He said, and I quote, "This isn't a negotiation, this is a declaration." I didn't say anything for a while, just sat there, watching the kids dip their brushes and hum to themselves like the world was exactly as it should be. Noah cleared his throat. You okay? Yeah, I said. I really am. He said he'd forward the documents that afternoon. I thanked him and hung up. Later that evening, after the kids had been picked up by their parents and the sun dipped low enough to turn the lake into liquid copper, I walked inside and found a small envelope on the kitchen counter. No return address. Just my name written in strong, familiar cursive. Inside was a single photograph. It was of the old family photo wall from Marlene's house, taken recently by the look of the frame colors. But one thing had changed. Beneath my photo, the one they never labeled, was a new brass plate. Demi, the one who finally said enough. I stared at it for a long time, then folded the photo and set it beside the unlit fireplace. That night, I made a fire. A slow one, the kind that starts with pine cones and patience. I added the photo without ceremony, watched the edges curl and catch and turn to nothing. Right before bed, I stepped out onto the porch. The night was cool again, stars scattered like salt above the tree line. I held a mug of tea, fingers warm around the ceramic. And then, like it was waiting for the right moment, my phone buzzed. One last voice message. "Demi," Isolde's voice said, clipped and strained. "You think this is over?" I didn't respond, because I wasn't interested in going back. I left the voice message to vanish on its own. No reply, no reaction. I didn't save it, didn't even listen to the whole thing, just deleted it without hesitation. There was no anger, no dramatic flare in my chest. Just calm, the kind of calm that comes when you know nothing they say can pull you back into the script you've already walked off. I leaned on the porch railing and watched the moon peek between the trees. The lake reflected its soft light like a mirror too tired to fight the night. Then I walked back inside the cabin, not as someone retreating, but someone claiming space. That night, after a hot shower and 2 pages of journaling, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a single sentence that had been circling my thoughts for days. They lost access to me the moment I stopped defending my right to exist. I closed the journal and turned off the lamp. The kind of peace I carried wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Not every closure comes with an apology. Some come with silence. And sometimes, silence is the most honest answer left. 3 days later, I checked the online forum where I'd anonymously posted a short version of my story. No names, no specific locations, just fragments of what it felt like to be erased and expected to smile through it. Buried beneath dozens of comments, one response stood out. "You gave me words for something I didn't know I was allowed to feel. Thank you, Demi." That was the first time anyone had used my name in a way that didn't expect me to flinch. I didn't reply. Just stared at the screen, letting the sentence wrap itself around parts of me that had been scraped raw. Whoever that person was, they'd reminded me that truth doesn't need an audience to matter. Later that week, on a Thursday morning draped in clouds, my father showed up unannounced. I heard his old pickup long before I saw him. It idled slow as it climbed the gravel path toward the cabin, crunching over loose stones, tires humming like they'd made this trip in his mind 100 times before. He didn't knock, just stood on the porch until I opened the door. We hadn't seen each other since the funeral. A silent man, always had been. He never took sides, just observed, a quiet presence in a noisy house. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded. We sat on the porch, mugs warming our hands, saying nothing for a long time. The lake shimmered, half covered in morning mist. A pair of loons called out in the distance, breaking the stillness without shattering it. Finally, he spoke. "Your grandma saw this in you long before the rest of us caught on." I looked at him, searching for judgment in his face. But there was none. Just a softness that came not from regret, but from understanding. "I'm not looking for an apology," I said. "I'm not offering one," he replied gently. We sipped. The silence between us wasn't heavy like it used to be. It was something else now, mutual. Before he left, he handed me a wooden box, said Grandma had meant for me to have it, but didn't get the chance to deliver it herself. Inside were old sketches of this cabin, her first drawings when she dreamed of having a place far from the noise, and tucked between the pages, in her spidery cursive, "This is where peace lives. Protect it." That afternoon, I walked into town. It was market day. Local honey, ceramic bowls, kids playing tag between vendor booths. A woman named Cheryl from the bakery waved me over. I bought a loaf of sourdough, then stopped by the hardware store. It was time. Back at the cabin, I took the old metal plaque off the post at the edge of the driveway, the one that read Quinn Family Cabin. I replaced it with a new one I'd had made the week before. Safe ground. Not dramatic, not loud, just true. Life after that became rhythm. I taught watercolor to kids at the library on Saturdays, repainted the shutters on the cabin myself, fixed the passenger window on my SUV, finally. No calls to Marlene for help, no borrowed favors. Just me and a YouTube tutorial and a wrench that didn't quite fit, but worked anyway. One evening, the town hosted a community dinner in the school gym, potluck style, folding tables lined with crock pots and casseroles, paper plates stacked high. I brought roasted vegetables and banana bread. At the check-in table, a teenage volunteer handed me a name tag. "Write your name clearly," she said, handing me a Sharpie. I didn't hesitate, didn't shorten it, didn't second guess. "Hello, my name is..." Midway through dinner, while refilling my cup with apple cider, a woman approached me. Late 40s, hair pulled back in a braid, soft eyes that had seen too much and learned how to carry it quietly. "You're the one who stood up to them, right?" she asked. I blinked. "Sorry?" She smiled. "Your story, that post, it made it around, even without your name. But someone said you lived out here now, that it might be you." I didn't panic, didn't feel exposed. Instead, I smiled back. "No," I said. "I just finally stood up for myself." When the dinner ended, I stepped outside. The air had cooled, but the wind was soft. The street lamps buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I paused before getting in the car. "I'm not healed completely," I whispered, voice steady. "But I'm no longer hiding. That's more than enough for now." Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who share your last name. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming your voice after being silenced, choosing truth over peace, and realizing that walking away is sometimes the most powerful stand you can take. Have you ever felt erased by your own family? What would you have done in Demi's shoes? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real, emotional stories that hit home. Your voice matters here.